Retired Master Sergeant Raymond Ray Holloway sat alone in the corner booth of Murphy's Diner. The morning paper spread neatly beside a half-empty cup of black coffee. The bell above the door jingled, and a heavy-set biker in a worn leather jacket stomped inside. His boots thudded against the tile as he stopped beside Ray's booth. "Move it, old man," the biker growled, leaning close enough for Ray to smell the engine oil on his gloves. Then, without warning, his hand cracked across the veteran's cheek, a single sharp slap that silenced the diner. Forks froze midway to mouths. The jukebox hummed alone in the background, and the old soldier didn't move. Raymond Holloway had turned 68 only 3 weeks earlier, yet he still carried himself with the straight-backed posture of a man who'd lived his life in uniform. For the past 5 years, every Tuesday morning without fail, he had claimed that same corner booth, the one with a clear view of the exit and the parking lot beyond Point 30. Years in the Army had built habits that never truly faded. Murphy's Diner was part of the town's heartbeat, family-owned for 3 generations. Its walls were crowded with faded black-and-white photographs of local heroes. Among them hung a picture of a young soldier in desert camouflage, Ray himself, though few realized it. Most patrons only saw an aging man with silver hair, pressed clothes, and a tiny American flag pin glinting on his lapel. Ray had enlisted in 1973, 3 months after turning 18, from the icy outposts of Cold War Germany to the scorching sands of Iraq and Afghanistan. He had served wherever duty called. Decades later, the frightened boy from Ohio had become the mentor responsible for shaping new recruits, young men who often reminded him of his own son. Michael Holloway, Ray's pride and purpose, had followed in his father's footsteps, graduating from West Point and earning his commission as an Army officer. Ray valued that achievement more than any medal on his wall. Michael had grown up on stories of honor and service instead of bedtime fairy tales, and he'd become the kind of leader Ray would have been proud to serve under. But wars leave their fingerprints on everyone. Ray came home with a limp and a purple heart. Michael returned carrying invisible scars, sleepless nights, restless eyes, the instinct to scan every room for threats. 3 years earlier, he'd moved back home, taking a position at the regional recruiting office so he could keep serving. In a different way, for Ray, having his son nearby again was a blessing. That peaceful routine shattered the morning Jake Thunder Morrison rolled into Murphy's parking lot on his roaring Harley at 9:47 a.m. sharp, just as Ray settled into his booth. Thunder was the leader of the Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club, a crew that had spent the last 6 months bullying its way across town. They weren't hobby riders. They thrived on intimidation and petty crime, claiming territory one diner and gas station at a time. Standing 6'4" and built like a wall, Thunder's tattooed arms told their own story. Brawls, prison time, and a life defined by fear and control. For the past 3 Tuesdays, he'd tried to claim Ray's booth. The first week, Ray had quietly moved elsewhere. The second week, he'd done the same. But today felt different. Today, the old soldier had decided he'd run far enough. When Thunder swaggered over, Ray looked up from his newspaper and said calmly that he'd been sitting at that booth for 5 years, and he'd prefer to keep it. Thunder's face turned crimson. He wasn't used to being told no, especially not by a man who looked like somebody's grandfather. He barked insults loud enough for everyone to hear that a young mother hurried her kids toward the exit. Waitresses froze behind the counter, and when Ray refused again, the biker's temper exploded. The slap landed like a gunshot that Ray's glasses hit the floor. Heat spread across his cheek, but humiliation stung far deeper. Every pair of eyes in the diner waited to see what the old man would do. For a heartbeat, Ray heard his father's voice reminding him to stand tall against bullies. He thought of his soldiers, of the flag on his jacket, of the son he'd raised to fight for what's right. That he reached down, picked up his glasses, checked for cracks, and slid them back on. His hands didn't shake. His gaze met Thunder's, steady, cold, and utterly unafraid. Then, without saying a single word, Ray took out his phone and made a call. Thunder chuckled, assuming the old man was calling the police. But Ray wasn't dialing 911, he was calling his son. "Dad, you okay?" Ray's voice was calm, too calm. "You might want to come down to Murphy's, son." "Why? What happened?" "Just bring your badge." When the call ended, Thunder was still smirking. "You think your little phone call scares me, Grandpa?" He leaned closer, hands on the table, voice dripping with mockery. You're lucky I didn't put you on the floor. Ray just sipped his coffee. You still can, he said quietly, if you really think you need to. Thunder hesitated. Something in the veteran's tone wasn't ordinary. That it wasn't the trembling voice of an old man. That it was steel, calm, measured, and trained. Minutes later, the rumble of an SUV echoed outside. The door swung open, and Captain Michael Holloway stepped in. Army uniform crisp, eyes sharp as blades. Every head turned. Even Thunder blinked in surprise. Dad, Michael said softly, scanning the room. You all right? Ray nodded toward the biker. This gentleman and I were just talking about respect. Michael faced Thunder. Sir, he said evenly, you just assaulted a decorated veteran. That's a felony. You can apologize and walk out, or I can put you in handcuffs. Thunder sneered. The other bikers at the counter shifted uneasily. They hadn't expected cops or soldiers. Apologize? Thunder scoffed. To him, he took a step forward, and in that split second, before Thunder's hand could rise again, Ray stood up. The movement was precise, practiced, and lightning fast. He caught Thunder's wrist midair, twisted it with controlled pressure, and in one motion, brought the massive biker down on his knees. The diner gasped. Coffee cups rattled. Thunder's breath hitched in pain, not from force, but from the shock of being outmatched. Ray leaned close. Young man, he said quietly, you see this pin? He tapped the small flag on his lapel. Men better than you died, so punks like you could eat breakfast in peace. Don't ever disrespect that again. When Ray released him, Thunder stumbled back, red-faced and trembling with rage. Michael stepped forward, voice low but firm. You heard the man. Apologize. And for the first time in years, the Iron Wolves leader lowered his head. I'm sorry. The diner remained silent. Not a whisper, not a sound, except the faint hum of the jukebox. Thunder and his crew left without another word. As the engines roared away, Ray sat back down, his expression unreadable. Michael took the seat across from him. You didn't have to call me Dad, he said gently. Ray smiled faintly. I didn't call you for help, son. I called you to witness something. Michael frowned. Witness what? That a man's honor doesn't retire. Outside, sunlight broke through the morning clouds. The waitress, who'd watched the whole scene with tears in her eyes, came over quietly and refilled Ray's coffee. On the house, Sergeant, she whispered. Ray just nodded, eyes distant. That a few minutes later, a group of teenagers entered the diner. One of them pointed at the wall of photos. Hey, isn't that him? They were looking at the old picture. The young soldier in desert camo. Ray's reflection in the glass lined up perfectly with the photo. Older, grayer, but still standing tall. Michael looked at his father, the man who had fought wars, buried friends, and never once asked for recognition. And for the first time, he understood something he'd always known but never felt. Courage isn't loud, that it's quiet, steady, and unbreakable. As they left the diner together, Michael said, You sure you're okay, Dad? Ray smiled. Better than ever. But next Tuesday. Michael grinned. Yeah. Ray's eyes twinkled. You're buying breakfast. They both laughed, stepping out into the sunlight. Two soldiers, two generations, bound by one unspoken truth. Real strength doesn't come from age, rank, or medals. That it comes from standing your ground when it matters most.